Well, so I hope everybody is slowly now joining, and you guys can, as Haldo just mentioned, please scan that QR code. I think there is a lot of nifty events and interesting info material. This is very good for young scientists, upcoming scientists, and also more senior scientists. Eraxis is really a great organization, and I'm again really thankful, for the DAD that we can join actually the Science Communication Series, and we are extremely honored that we can create kind of the last session, which we also kind of see as the finale and maybe also kind of the highlight of the whole series. And just maybe for people that still don't know who I am, this is a bit of stuck. Here you go. So my name is Melanie Späte, and today's topic was quite a journey. I think, Haldo, you would probably agree with me that we kind of went through, because many people, and that actually includes me, have kind of not really an idea, like what it's like this, the term scientific entrepreneur, by itself, it kind of sounds like a contradictory term, and I suspect that the idea that a scientist would maybe not make a very good entrepreneur comes very largely from the common perception of what a successful entrepreneur looks like, right? So I kind of had an adrenaline junkie with nerves of steel who is willing to kind of take a huge risk for the 1 in a million idea. And we all heard, of course, many stories, especially of founders of very well-known tech companies that perhaps have like really amazing insights and also took like a risk on an idea that very few around them believe would actually work. So, but these outlying examples can leave many young people and young scientists thinking that perhaps they really don't have themselves what it takes to either start their own company or maybe turn their idea into reality. So the question that I've asked myself, can these two very seemingly different career paths overlap? Do they contradict each other, or is this maybe something that both can benefit from one another, right? So I did a little bit of digging of maybe famous scientists that kind of straddle into also the private sector or the industry sector. And I found two very old examples and very famous examples. So number one, I think everybody knows him. He doesn't really need to be introduced, Thomas Edison. He's kind of, to me, like textbook example of a scientist who really converted an invention into an extremely successful commercial application. He has over 1,000 US patents, but of course his greatest discoveries, as everybody knows, is the phonograph and obviously the light bulb. And not long actually after this invention of that light bulb, he actually recruited a team of high-powered investors. And maybe you guys even know one of these investors is JP Morgan. I think that should ring a bell. And formed actually the Edison Electric Light Company. And from the onset on, his vision was to make electricity so available to the masses and so cheap that only the rich people would actually burn candles. A second example that came across was mine, and I had to, of course, also introduce a female version to that. That is Marie Kudi, who is obviously also, don't need much of an introduction, but she is also a scientist who demonstrated a concern for the commercial ramification of her work. And what makes her especially extraordinary is, of course, the fact that she lived during a lifetime, during a time when women were not really generally accepted within either the scientific nor the business communities. And despite these obstacles, right, a discovery of the element radium opened the door for further discoveries and in the area, of course, of radioactivity. And she sensed kind of the importance of her discovery, so she refrained actually from patenting her radium isolation process. And additionally, she actually went out of her way to collaborate with the industry. So she trained industrial physicists in her own laboratory. And even though that collaborative spirit of hers has kind of hurt her personally in a financial way, but it did lead to its own reward. So she, of course, was rewarded with two prizes, including actually a Nobel Peace Prize. So these are kind of like just a few examples followed by many, many more scientists that they can probably be actually, in fact, quite successful entrepreneurs. And not all of them match always this, what I said at the beginning, like this kind of heroic risk-taking persona with a 1 in a million idea. And instead, probably most of them are actually quite careful, taking the time to analyze their big leap. And they're considering also to make sure the risks are manageable. So I would like to maybe point out what I think could be a few strengths that all of you present, to make you actually quite well suited to start to dabble kind of into the industry world, right? So number one, of course, scientists, you guys are very great problem solvers. And if you, for example, start your own company or actually have your own idea, you will be doing something that nobody else has probably done before. Of course, many people have opened up companies, but I mean, this will be something that's very unique to you and your idea, and you will be faced with your very own problems that you will have to face head on. Another thing that came across to me is like you being a part of the private sector involves entering into a whole new environment with many things to learn. And I think all of you guys who have received a PhD is presented with usually project they know very little about in the beginning. So to be awarded that degree, you need to complete, the project very independently. You have to find out where and how and quickly to get your materials and your insights. And I think these are very useful skills in starting up your own ideas and company. And I think the last, and there's many, many more actually advantages, is being quite resourceful. Usually you need to, achieve critical early stage milestones. And if you invent like a prototype development or you test your theory, and usually we don't really have much money. So to most of you guys, this is really not new because research grant funding is quite hard to secure. And often you need to learn to be very resourceful with either your money and also your time to accomplish your research goals. So to conclude kind of my introduction, I'm extremely excited to welcome somebody very special, which is Dr. Ulf Richter. Thank you so much. He is here joining us from Hong Kong. I will keep actually the introduction to you, Dr. Richter, a little bit brief because I think you will elaborate a little bit more about this, but just to say a few words, you are many things. You're a professor, you're an author, you're a serial entrepreneur, and you have many academic appointments that you had before, including the City University of Hong Kong. You are also in the Tongji University in Shanghai, University of Nottingham, Ningbo in China, and you also used to be a visiting fellow at the Harvard University. And you are also at the same time an award-winning entrepreneur and you have 20 years of cross-sectional work experience throughout Asia, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. I think it's really exciting that you can join us here and give us actually your insight, because I think you are somebody that has straddled both fields and both arenas, and it will be, we will really greatly learn from you here. So before I kind of give the microphone over to you, just maybe for the participants, and of course you can always ask questions. It would be very helpful if you guys just post it in the chat, and I will be kind of asking the question afterwards, just that you know, because we also have another expert joining us later. So we will do this like this. We have the keynote speech from Dr. Richter, then we do have a little Q&A, and then we're also open to like all sorts of questions you guys have. And please grasp at the opportunity and ask him anything you want, because he's actually the expert that has straddled both arenas. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, Dr. Richter, and I will just hand over directly to you.
Okay, good afternoon from Hong Kong. I hope you can hear me well. All right, so thank you first of all for the invitation. I was quite surprised, to be honest, when my friend from Shanghai actually passed me that information. But I'm very happy to share some insights from my journey and how I got to the point where I am today. So, okay, you already introduced me. My CV looks a bit, how to say, most people get a bit confused because there's so many appointments. And yes, please.
Do you want to share your PPT, Dr. Richter?
I thought I am. But I am not.
I took it away from you because I shared first mine.
No problem. Then I have to put it back. This is sharing again. Sorry for this. Here we go. Okay, so, all right. Can you see my screen now?
Perfectly. Yes, we can see the screen.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Okay, so yes, so thank you again for the invitation, and let me get back. So I don't want to talk about myself so much, about my CV. It's pretty diverse, but one thing I wanted to say is that one of the reasons I became an entrepreneur was that at many different points in my career, I had little breaks, and these breaks really made me think, what do I really want to accomplish in my life? And if you see, I had always the ambition to become a professor, but at the same time, my key concern was always, how can I achieve most impact? And when doing my PhD, I thought that would be publishing and becoming eventually a public intellectual. But at some point, I really thought I want to invent a product, or I want to be part of a team that invents a product, or eventually, build a big company that would pursue a certain mission-based business model. So today I am you already introduced my vita a little bit, but just to give you a quick one quick comment here. Today I run two major entities. One is called Victorian Limited, which obviously is my name, and I have turned it into a holding company. And the second is a startup that I've been starting last year called CarnTNBX, and I will talk about this a little bit later. But the reason I actually came to Hong Kong was because I got an appointment by a Russian oil and gas company, Lukoil, which of course today is not such a popular name anymore. And then I got stuck here in Hong Kong because of the COVID crisis, of course, and it didn't allow me to move out of Hong Kong anymore, which then basically became the reason why I started looking into many of my projects that I had been doing in the past and building them into full-fledged companies. So I will come back to this a little later, but maybe let me start with a couple of comments on the reason why I became an academic entrepreneur. So when I joined my PhD program, I went to Switzerland, to HEC Lausanne, to work on supply chains and corporate responsibility along supply chains. Now, my own supervisor, Guido Palazzo, is a political philosopher / business ethics professor, quite well known by now. But back then, he had just been appointed for 1 year. And as such, he didn't have much funding. So I was promised a position. I was actually promised to be funded by a project by Volkswagen, but that turned out not to be possible. And so I had to find myself a job. And I did. I went to work for a bank, Morgan Stanley. And I realized I really liked the way how in the bank, there was very clear objectives. We were doing equity research back then, which was, I only did it for a year, but it was quite a rigorous training as well for my own thinking. But it did help me to basically, because I was in a PhD program while working in a bank and I had to constantly switch. I was doing 50-50. I had to constantly switch the logic from corporate thinking to the more open and free thinking in the university. Now, in the university, of course, the focus was always on thought leadership, some ideally revolutionary new ideas. Myself, I was focusing on corporate responsibility, which back then was a very hot topic, but also very niche. And when I graduated, many people asked me how I would ever get a job, but fortunately I managed that. But it was made very clear to me very quickly. HEC Lausanne is a very research-oriented entity. that it would all be about publications. It would be all about research. And some of my colleagues have become, many of my colleagues actually from my PhD program have become very successful professors by now. Unfortunately for myself, I always felt a bit unhappy about the fact that we could not really collaborate that much in that situation. But I'm happy to make some more comments on this at a later point. So I got quite attracted at some point when I went to Harvard. I got myself involved in all kinds of startups. I participated in the MIT 100K. And back then, impact investing was a very big topic. I almost got hired by the Global Reporting Initiative. So I got quite excited, and I tasted the, let's say, I tasted the entrepreneurial. I had the entrepreneurial experience, and I really liked it. We then got a grant for one of our projects that was basically based on my PhD topic, and we built a small little project. We got 500,000 US back then for that project. Problem was we didn't have the right technology. The idea was to trace big companies, basically the idea was to trace what big companies' impact would be on, and to use the insights from the civil society organizations. But we didn't have any blockchain back then. So it miserably failed, also because I guess as a team, we didn't do a very good job in cooperating properly. So yeah, I was asked to answer these two questions with regards to how well does academia prepare for the commercial world. I would say not so much personally. I think I was, after I got my master's, I was much more ready for working in a bank, and then going through the PhD program, I was almost not capable of being hired anymore. I graduated in 2008 during the financial crisis, and there was basically no jobs, and nobody wanted people with a PhD. And so that didn't help much. What did help, though, was that over time, but it took me some time to figure that out, that the fact that that I was trained in writing proposals, that I was trained in publishing, would help me quite a bit in conceptualizing and in fundraising as well, eventually, because I write a lot of proposals these days and contracts as well. Leading a company in an academic context, question number 2. The reality is that at some point I felt I wanted to, so now that I've been working on my 2 companies for quite some time. My first company, by the way, was founded in 2013. It was originally a consulting firm, but eventually it became a holding company. I have somewhere between 6 to 8 companies by now, depending on how you count. Some of them are subsidiaries. The point is that I realized that when you really want to solve very large problems, you obviously need to focus on collaboration. You have to focus on team. You have to focus on how do you set goals and motivate people to accomplish these goals. And just before this presentation, I met with a gentleman who is building a very large, he's focusing on the food supply chain. And what I took from academia before was really to focus on the big picture, and this has helped me quite a bit in my development of my companies. But then when I came into the companies, and it's really about execution and how do you really make people, how do you incentivize them that they really accomplish something? That helped me then. But when I took it back into the academic context, it helped me quite a bit to understand how I would. Let me put it this way. Previously, I very often I would get lost a little bit with my research. It would take a long time to publish. It would take a long time to really focus on something. I had basically during my PhD in particular, I had one person only that I would dedicate all my attention to. later, which was of course my supervisor. And I had a couple of peers I would discuss my research with, but it was a pretty lonely experience, which I'm pretty sure most of you know very well. Later, when I was a professor in many different countries, I often was competing with my colleagues over promotion. And it's a very small world, to be honest. And also, people compete over very small stakes, such as promotion or a smaller grant and so on. The kind of amounts that I deal with today, the kind of stakes are much, much higher. So collaboration has become much more important. And looking back, if I had been collaborating a little more in the past in my own academic journey, I would probably still be a professor. But I think that was one of the key problems. I was actually not really prepared for this, and I was not well trained for it, which today I would argue was unfortunate, but it was also one of the stepping stones that brought me to work in a commercial context. So yeah, so I mean, I'm basically this whole conundrum between being a specialist versus a generalist has been part of my journey for 20 years by now. I've been basically accelerating from one side to the other, but commercial people often consider me to be very specialized, while in the academic context, I was often considered to be too general with my ideas and what I was trying to accomplish. Anyways, let me get into some of the projects I've been working on over the last years. I mentioned my startup, my first startup. I was 26 when I did that. Probably because actually my first attempt to become a PhD fellow was to go to Stanford. That didn't work out, but I took the very same application and took it to Harvard, and they accepted me. So that was a nice turn. And yeah, basically that's where the whole journey really started. Later, when I graduated, I mentioned I graduated in 2008. I went to Africa. Now that's a bit unusual for most people, but the reason was simple. In 2008, almost all the schools that I applied to said they had no positions. I did find one, but they only wanted to make me a postdoc. And I had been studying for 5 years. I'd been doing so many things. I'd already started, I think I had 2 publications, good publications back then. And I thought this cannot be it. So I looked for a new challenge, a big challenge that, again, my whole original journey was always about how can I create impact. So I thought Africa would be a very big topic. And I was looking then, I was teaching there as well, but my main goal was to do something for the people and also for the whole environment. So I picked a project. Back then, the country had gone through a civil war, pretty wild environment. And I would then basically develop projects for the government. One of them, this particular project that you can see here, and sustainable waste management in Africa. Unfortunately, we weren't very successful. It turned out that the niece of the president had sold this project to basically an individual that was fronting for the president, and they didn't have the capacity to implement the project, so it never happened. The project was quite big. I got very excited back then. I think it was my first big project. It was a $250 million project, and I was the project developer. And this is where I did use my academic skills, because I obviously had been taught how to write, and I wrote a pretty good proposal. But what I hadn't learned was how to manage all the corruption and all the politics in Africa, which I ran into all the time. So eventually this project never happened, and the landfill that you see here on the pictures still looks pretty much the same way. It's a very large landfill. It was, so back then it was one of the biggest landfills in Africa. The city has 5 million people, and the goal here was to set up a modern waste management, but it didn't happen. Now, this was 10 years ago. I still like this very much. I think we were too early. Back then, most countries were mainly concerned with power, with infrastructure construction. During that time, for instance, when I went there first, there was no Chinese companies, and then a lot of Chinese companies came in. Reason also why I got quite interested in understanding what was going on in China. I didn't have much understanding back then. So, and also because my PhD topic was global supply chains and corporate responsibility. Of course, I have been exposed to a lot of ideas about China, but I felt I need to go and see them on the ground. So I went to China. I went to work first at the University of Nottingham in Ningbo, and then I worked at the University of Tongji. And during that time, I got very much involved in quite a number of topics. I didn't really put this here out, but first of all, because I had been in Africa, China and Africa, and China going global became a very big topic. So from that, I was invited to become an expert for the 2 sessions to discuss, well, basically provide an independent view on the Belt and Road Initiative. And now, if you're familiar with the Belt and Road Initiative, you know that in the beginning, it was mainly about energy security, later about food security. So 50% of the original Belt and Road projects were basically projects that would be pipelines or any energy infrastructure that would help supply China with energy and eventually other commodities. So many of the railway projects that were built, one of our first clients for training at the University of Nottingham was CRRC. I built the German program for them. I took them all over Germany, including to the Deutsche Bahn, the German railway company, which we signed an MOU with. And yeah, I gradually entered into the commercial world more as an advisor back then. I was also advising Mercedes at some point on electrical vehicles in China. And but I got very excited about, or excited is maybe too much. I got quite interested in really using some of my skills as somebody who understood different global trends, let's put it this way, and what the needs were on the ground. So I started consulting with a couple of major Chinese companies back then, but also companies like Mercedes inside of China. But all of this was still consulting activity. I did quite a lot of speeches around China. But then later, I got appointed by Lukoil to help them in their China operations. Reason why I got into the commodity trading quite deeply. And that brought me then to Hong Kong. And since last year, I got out of oil and gas for many reasons. Also, my original idea being in oil and gas was to work on energy transition for Lukoil. That's what I had proposed to them. So to basically help create, well, we thought originally of hydrogen and LNG would be the big topics. It came a bit differently because of what happened with the COVID crisis and more recently. But then when last year I thought, let's put it all together. And I took some of the, well, I didn't mention I was also always playing a little bit with the technology sector. So I've been involved in with Telegram and some other companies that back then got in touch with the whole blockchain environment. And but back then it was mainly from an academic perspective. But last year, I realized what I really want to do is combine all of this resources. So carbon basically, what we're building right now is a carbon credit platform and the technology side of it, and also the, the sustainability, of course, goals that we've been working on from the very beginning. Well, today I say we, of course, we have a team, but my original PhD was always about how do we improve the operations of companies. So yeah, so that's a little bit my journey. I'm very happy to discuss with you in more, maybe in a more interactive format, because there's a lot of things that I'm happy to share with you. One thing I can say is that I personally, I mean, everyone has his personal story, of course. In my case, I had a big idea originally, but a lot of the things I really did it out of intuition. So coming to China was an intuitive move. Coming to Hong Kong was, and working for oil and gas for some time was also an intuitive move. But it really helped me to see a big corporate. So Lukoil is a $100 billion company, to see that from the inside, and also how they work. It showed me how commodity trading works and what the logics are. I got in touch with big banks, of course, because the deals are very large. And but then I also came back to some of the ideas that we had originally when at the university, how we can do system change and how can we achieve more sustainability in the world. So that's basically where I come from. And today I sit here in Hong Kong. I'm part of the Hong Kong entrepreneurship environment. Right now we're based in Cyberport with this particular company. And we have been participating in a number of competitions. We have a very big project now. It's with the Mongolia government, where we want to tokenize the forest reserve. There's a lot of problems involved, but it's quite exciting. Pretty much, I don't know if we should maybe, well, this is my last slide. And then I would like to move on to Q&A. So one of the key questions that Melanie asked me to answer is if you need to choose between being an academic or being an entrepreneur or a business person. I personally believe you don't. My experiences have been moving from one sector to the other on a regular basis. I've taken these two very famous people now as an example. I mean, fortunately, they met the right people. They had good ideas and met if you know their history, you know that they've been trying to sell their discoveries for a long time, but they set up a company more out of because they couldn't find anyone who would license their findings, and then eventually, of course, they became very successful and very rich as well, and they're still researchers. So I personally believe you can, but you obviously need to find a very, very good team. So one of my key concerns that I have today with everything I'm doing is always about people. So, and you need a very, very good combination of people who can think, of people who can take action, of people who can market maybe what you're doing, and also believe really in the mission, what you're doing. So just before this conference call or on this workshop, one of my friends, he said, so we are planning to do a joint venture. He said, look, I'm basically moving the company totally without money. And that's exactly why people want to invest in my company, because I have so many creative ways how to move my company from one level to the other. And if I had a lot of money, people would not be interested, because then I would not provide any additional value to what everyone else in a normal corporate can do. And a final comment that I want to make before we come to the Q&A session. Just this morning, I was looking at the news, sustainability news. So today, of course, I follow everything that is related to carbon credits and sustainability and climate change and the Paris agreements. So this morning, I read that a professor from Germany, I mean, it's already 1 month old, but apparently I missed it. So there's a professor from Germany, he's from forestry management, and he set up a joint venture together with Volkswagen. It's called Volkswagen Climate Partners. So I was quite impressed, because he has now a blockchain team, and he does forestry management out of Germany in order to supply Volkswagen with carbon credits, I assume. And sometimes it may take you some time. I mean, I cannot really tell. There's famous examples of people who became very late entrepreneurs that basically capitalize on the whole experience they accumulated. Myself, I've always been trying here and there. I've had by now maybe somewhere between 15 to 20 companies. And out of those, many of them have not been particularly successful, but I would argue each time I learned a little bit. And yeah, that's where I am today. So thank you very much. And happy to hear your comments or questions.
Bravo, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Richter. Thank you all for this question. So I actually have a few questions from somebody called Corinne. She's texted me that actually privately. And I hope, Corinne, just let me know if I phrase your questions correctly, but I see you don't really have a microphone, so I want to be posing this. So she has two. One is, she thanks you for your presentation, and because you have said you've already opened up quite a few actually companies. And for example, the first one didn't come really to fruition, correct? Because there were some challenges that you have been facing. How do you, first of all, besides your intuition, how do you actually do the risk management for yourself? And how do you every time, find again, motivation to still go at it and do it again and try it again? That will be the first question from Kudi.
Right. So look, the first time I was very, very upset that my company didn't work out. I mean, we got a decent amount of funding, but I was very naive. I believed in my professor, and he was the one who actually kicked me out eventually. So that was a bit of a tough experience in my life, to be honest. I was young and believed in my professor, of course. I realized very quickly that risk management is indeed very important, and I had not done enough of it. Even my own father told me, please be very careful. When there's big money involved, then people can get greedy very quickly. Yeah, so what did I learn? Today, I like to fund companies by myself, and I do joint ventures with other people, but I always keep some of the control for myself. That's one thing. The second is, I think, again, I can just repeat that. It's all about people. You really need to trust people and build. I mean, that's at least how I work. Some people can have different models. They have very, they may go through, let's put it this way. There's always ways, if you know, for instance, the Alibaba case, where you can set up a company with people and investors and so on, but some people may take the key IP out of it and put it into another company. So it's very important to protect yourself in this. If, for instance, you're the one who is building the IP and who is bringing the IP in, again, I was very naive in the beginning. I thought I would automatically be named on a patent, for instance. I wasn't. It's a classic problem. If you have do like what I'm doing now in tech companies, very often you have tech VCs that will tell you, okay, I'll give you money, but you have to kick out half of your team. And that's basically the team that did create that company, but then for whatever reason, they get kicked out. So today I try to limit my team to very few people for whatever I do. I also try to make sure that if IP is being created or IP is key to, or if it's licensed, I want to be involved. I mean, I obviously want to be because if your key IP is developed by a third party and this third party has learned about your business model and then leaves the company, then you're obviously having a very big problem. So if you don't have any control over this, it's also quite dangerous. I hope I answered your questions.
Yes, she gives a thumbs up. There's actually a second question that is right followed after. So she's asking, if somebody would have now an idea. So you're sitting at home as a young scientist, as a young researcher, they have an idea. How would they get in contact with somebody like you who actually has companies? Is this something that people write you a proposal? Do they set up a meeting with you and have to pitch it in person? Like how would that work?
So okay, let's put it this way. I think, so for instance, I have a new company idea every month, every week, basically. And I'm also, I set up almost, I think 10 companies last year. Now, many of these companies may not be very successful. Some of them may die. Sometimes I acquire my own company now. So I've just acquired my own company in Shanghai because I need that company for something else. And the original idea was a consulting firm. Now I want something else, and I'm simply redoing the company. So I think it doesn't hurt to simply set up something for yourself and then start really the process and do it in a low-cost environment. Hong Kong is one, but there's others. In case you sit in China, there's a lot of innovation parks where you can plug into the innovation hubs. I mean, in particular now that the situation is the way it is, many people are looking for creative, young, motivated people that would be willing to team up and set up a new company. So I've never had a problem doing this. I've done it for many times in many different places. I even had a company in Peru. I had several ones in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast for the tendering. I've always tried to keep the cost as low as possible. So I don't like to hire people. If I can avoid it, I don't. I prefer bringing in people as shareholders if I can. I give them a share. At least key people like a programmer or CFO or any key responsible, an engineer, for instance. If you're the person with the idea, I strongly recommend to bring in somebody who has experience in execution of whatever idea you have. So let's say a sort of CEO who can basically handle everything and also pitch, do fundraising, and so on. Another idea is sometimes if you have a really good idea, but you don't want to do it yourself, then you can also, some people license their ideas and they get a share in a company. So they basically go to entrepreneurship competitions and they say, look, I have a really good idea, I have a patent or something that I want to be commercialized, but I'm not the person who's going to do all the pitching and the selling and the building of the team. I don't want to manage anyone. And I've met a couple of people like that, and they say, look, I really like my research, but I think it has commercial value. So sometimes you can give that to other people and say, look, I take whatever percentage I believe it's worth, maybe 50, maybe 25%, and you build a company around it. But you have a core IP, and many people look for core IP. So it really depends on your own, do you want to do it yourself, or do you want to basically see it commercialized? Here in Hong Kong, I met a couple of scientists. They also had IP. Often they're a bit afraid of sharing what they have. And I say, look, I mean, IP in itself, if you don't find people who are really good at commercializing it, then yeah, you go nowhere, right? I mean, you may make a little money of it, but if you think about Google in the beginning, the two PhD guys, they wanted to license out their technology. They would have never become Google if they had just done what they thought was the right thing to do. They needed a guy who came in who really understood how to build a company. Yeah.
So that leads actually right to the next question. So Professor Florian Stadler asked, how do you protect your IP against copycats? He's laughing already. Yeah.
Look, the truth is you can't. In many cases, you can't. So how can you do it? I mean, I happen to be a strategy professor. So we think about what are the ways how to, what kind of barriers can you create? You can build a big brand. Branding is an excellent one. Of course, you can patent as much as you want, but as you know, very often patents can still be copied, and or there can be small modifications, and then people just do the same what you're doing. I do think, in particular, when you're in China, you want a very strong partner that can protect you. So that can be either a powerful individual, or there can be a big company that protects you as a partner. Here in Hong Kong, it's typically a family office of one of the big boys. We have about 6 families that run all of Hong Kong. If you can get one of them on board, then you're golden. But some people also try to basically the idea might be simple, but they make it sound very, very complicated because that in itself makes people think this is very complicated to be copied, and only specialists can actually realize that this is not the case. So I think the best way to do it is to be fast. The best way to be fast, why? Because if you're, for instance, right now, I mean, I am in carbon credits. Carbon credits is a topic that's very hot, and where many people are right now working on. And it's kind of 5-6 years ago when cryptocurrencies and the crypto exchanges were created. It's a bit of the same environment. It's mainly about being fast and building your user adoption. So I know many people who have really good projects, including some of my friends in Germany. They built like a solar vehicle, but they were simply too slow. So they had a good idea, but because they're so slow, they couldn't get enough money and too late in order to compete with some of their global competitors. So I think speed is of essence. I didn't make that clear in the beginning, but in the academic world, you always try to be very thorough, and it's about rigor, and so you spend a lot of time to do the right thing. But when you're in a startup environment, you have to be fast, and you have to be able to make. You don't have to be afraid of making a mistake, and your product may not be perfect, but you get it out and get feedback, and people will. Or you have to create a product in faster than your competitors, huh? Even if it's not so perfect.
Right, thank you. So I'm going to give, for now, Haldo has raised his hand. So maybe you just take over the microphone, and I have one last question.
I think we still have 5 minutes for question. I was actually wondering if we should move on, but because we have 5 minutes, I would love to get some feedback from Ulf on a couple of things that I think are really interesting and important for researchers. So like first of all, the first thing that I notice is that the reason why a lot of scientists and academic types don't really go down the entrepreneurial route is because, let's say, they have a hard time balancing their motivations, let's say, because people that become academics like yourself, like a lot of times they're motivated by, let's say, the joy of discovery or research, or even the impact of the research and so on. So I wonder, you as a professor before, etc., and now an entrepreneur, how you manage to sort of like balance both your want to like make some like discover things and research and do that, as well as like making money and do good business. That's like my first question. And then my second question, a little bit more general, is about sort of like when you're starting a startup, and you have done quite a bit of them, you've done a few of those. I wonder, one of the big things that always come to my mind, and I know it's a little bit embarrassing and people might not like want to say it or whatever, but normally the first thing that I stumble upon is like, you normally aren't alone, right? You have like maybe one or two other person with you. How do you decide internally who is going to own what, etc., you know, like with your co-founders? This question actually in the context of academia, it reminds me a little bit of you know, like who is going to be the main author when you're publishing and so on, who's going to be the second and third and everything. And there are the rules and rule of thumbs that people like rely on in academia. I wonder what is normal and like how people go about when they're doing startups and so on. Thank you, Dr. Richter.
Right. Well, look, the first question, I have to admit, I mean, in the beginning, I was a very academic entrepreneur. So I mentioned I did the waste management project, which it was big, but I approached it from a pretty academic perspective. I wrote a beautiful proposal. I really did a lot of research on everything I could do, but I missed one very, very important aspect, which they had been telling me from the very beginning, that it's Africa and you have to do the way Africans do it. And I was trying, being the German guy, I was trying to do it right and correct and not corrupt and any of this. And it just didn't work. So now I was, of course, struggling a little bit with my ideas of how I had been taught at the university, and then making things happen. Now, to be honest, today, when I go to Africa quite often, except for the last 2 years, but normally I do. I don't really take my academic lens on it anymore, but I have a framework that I use. My framework was always about how can you really empower these people? How can you make these societies work? And what you know, again, I mean, I was trained as a political philosopher by a political philosopher, and I had this big idea: how can you help this continent, right? I mean, what would work? But originally, I basically took Western models and put them into that in thought models, business models, conceptual models, and put it into that context. And that was it didn't work. It was wrong. And so over time, I really learned to listen much more to the local voices, and that has helped a lot. Just listening a lot more and not trying to push my own ideas. So, and the same is true for China. The same is true for many other places I've been to by now. I think that was a big change, because originally, see, in the academic world, you are supposed to push your ideas, right? And as much as you can, and see the impact of them. And this is it can be a lot of fun, but I realized if I do that, I mean, to a certain extent, they wanted to hear my ideas, but in reality, I had to listen much more than pushing them. So that was a very, very important change in how to do things. So today I'm more like, you tell me what you want to accomplish and what's really important for you, and I try to see if I can support this. And if I can, then maybe we have a really good business in front of us. The second question, sorry, about the startup, please remind me. Sorry, the second question.
Yeah, how do you decide the split amongst co-founders?
Oh yes. Okay, so yes, sorry. So how do I split? Look, I have decided to do, I go two ways. On the one hand side, I have one structure which is really my own. It's 100% mine, and it's like an investment vehicle. I invest into my own companies, plus I come in as a shareholder with other people. Now, if somebody comes with a big idea and says, look, I'm going to do 75% of the project, yeah, it's fine. I don't mind. I don't have to be in control. If I trust that person has the capability to control this project and to make it run, even if, I mean, the smallest, I'm a shareholder of a very small shareholder in one project. And the only reason I'm in that project is to help my friend to make this. I mean, I own the company, I'm a co-owner, but at a very low percentage. And it turned out to be a very good choice, because I helped this person, and then I get all the services that he provides for free, right? So honestly speaking, it's a bit, I'm happy to join somebody who's very strong and have a low percentage. When I feel this is really, it's really my own idea, my own thing, yes, I take 100% or 75% or something else. I do have many colleagues that say, I have the money, you have the idea, we do 50-50. So I'm right now in two joint venture discussions, to be clear, where I come with the whole IP, so to speak, and my colleagues come with the business. So they have a use case, so to speak. I do know that good teams, I mean, in entrepreneurship, we typically say good teams have 3 or 4 people. And if you know each other well, and you think it should be equal, yes, then you can do 25 or 33%, and everyone feels equal. But sometimes you need a boss. And in many occasions, it's better if one person is clearly positioned as a boss. And then you bring in 2, 3 more people that can execute certain functions. So to be honest, I've been in all kinds of situations, from 100% to my smallest venture. I'm just a 5% shareholder. I don't know if that's makes sense to you, but I mean, look, if I was to like what the Google guys did, right? You have your PhD friend and you have some genius new idea. Or what BioNTech's the same case, right? I mean, you have two people commercializing their research, and then somebody comes in and and brings the money. So you say, okay, how much is that money worth? But okay, I saw a question on the shares. That's very easy. If anyone needs help on this, if anyone wants a Hong Kong company, I happen to own a company that sets up companies. So just send me an email. And I'm not charging for this. Yeah? The people who do that charge, but I don't. If you want to do something in China, today I run two business models. One is where I have my Hong Kong company, and I also I get a lot of requests to work in innovation parks in like Shenzhen, in Shanghai, and also in Zhejiang. I used to live in Ningbo, of course, and sometimes it's good to have a company outside of China for fundraising reasons, and Hong Kong is quite good for that. And sometimes to have it inside of China if you want to access the Chinese market. Another hot destination right now is Dubai and Abu Dhabi. They are very, very keen on attracting new companies. Sometimes it's maybe good to have the company there, but the market is somewhere else. So the locations I personally like is I like Hong Kong, I like Singapore, I like Dubai. And I also have a small company in Germany now. So yeah, pretty much.
Right, thank you so much. I think we would take you probably up for your offer. So just because people have been asking me if they can get your contact, of course, we will be sharing your PPT where all your contact information is on it. And thank you for this offer, actually, also to our participants to do this type of services for free. This is interesting.
No, sure. It still costs money to set up a company, right? I mean, you do have to pay for the fees, but I wouldn't charge anything. I can do that as a service.
Thank you, Dr. Richter. I think we have to conclude the first part, which was your keynote speech by now. Thank you so much for your time. I think you are also kind of on the jump to your next venture or to your next meeting. So I'm very grateful that you took so spontaneously this task, and I hope we will be seeing more from you in the future. And it's great that you could share so many, also just personal accounts and personal stories and your own experience with the audience.
Thank you very much.
Greetings from China. Stay healthy, and
Thanks.
I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Halder, I'm going to just hand over to you because we also have another expert, and I'm very keen on also listening to what he has to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melanie. And thanks to Dr. Richter, who just left. Too bad I didn't get a chance to thank him myself. Well, I'll try to call him. So first of all, before I start, I just want to say thank you so much, Melanie, for moderating the first part and helping out with our webinar last week. I think these two webinars have been an excellent example of how the DAD, the German Academic Exchange Center, and Euraccess can work together. I've been so happy to work with you guys. You guys have been such a good partners in all of this. It's been really great. So thank you so much for that. And it has also been a little bit of an experiment, hasn't it? Because last week about the following, which is a science communication competition. And I guess that's on topic, right? We are, after all, a science communication training series. That's what's going on. And before that, we were talking about a little bit more sort of like about how to present on stage and how to get published, which is probably the most common, most dry, boring version of communicating as a scientist, but also the most important, let's say, if for a normal academic, etc. But this week we decided to try something new and talk about how to sort of bridge the gap between industry and academia. And what has that to do with science communication, you might ask? Well, I mean, like, first of all, you're never going to be successful at business unless you know how to communicate. So, I mean, like, one of the things that we were talking about last week is how to pitch your ideas, etc. And that really connects, for sure. But besides that, we also we also need to take into account that why we try to communicate our science and so on. And I think in the end, what it always boils down to, that communication is basically our way to manifest things into the world. So when researchers come up with new ideas, new data, new finding, etc., the next sort of the other side of all of that is sort of making it real. And we kind of, human beings, we work in the way that we do that by using our mouths. So I thought it would be really interesting and fun when Melanie came up with the idea to talk about how academia and industry can connect, because that's basically where this kind of magic happens. It's when you take these ideas, you kind of make them into reality, create something that people can enjoy. So that is really cool thing. And it was a little bit scary for us to deal with this particular issue, because honestly, I have to say, Euraccess is not really good, has not a lot of experience with that at all. It is a hot topic that in the European Union that we're supposed to be more emphasize more innovation. We should talk more about entrepreneurship, etc. But when it comes down to it, we basically are always working with the researchers and the academia and the universities and so on. So now we're trying this a little bit. We want to at least erase the question, start to talk about this. And it was really, really fun to listen to Dr. Richter, how he, as a scientist, takes his ideas and spins them off into companies, etc. And this is a culture that us, the Europeans in the audience today, might not be super familiar with. We think academics should always be like this stuck up, save for life faculty person, you know, but I think maybe a lot of our Chinese colleagues might be more used to it, because I have to say, when I've been traveling around China, every other professor I meet also runs a company. It's very, very common in Chinese academia. At least the more sort of senior you get, the more likely it is. And it's also really encouraged, right, to kind of take these IPs and create something with them and so on. So maybe we can also learn from China, the Chinese. Anyway, from that point of view, of ignorance, I thought it would be really interesting to pair up our first speaker of today, where we got this point of view of the individual researcher that went out and started their business, and hear a little bit from the other side of the aisle, hear from the business side, how they deal with, let's say, academics and individual entrepreneurs, etc. And I have to admit, the reason why this is something I want to put in here was because I myself would love to learn about this. I have a lot of questions. I would love to know how this works. This has always been a blank, totally something that I know nothing about. And I have a feeling many of us don't know how the business world works at all. We know how academia works, but we don't know how about the business world. And it so happens that we are super lucky, because today we have with us a representative from Audi China, which is a very respected big corporation, really innovative, engages all kinds of R&D and so on. And I want to try to get him to kind of crack the mystery of how corporations deal with R&D and how possibly researchers could engage with that. So Audi China is a company that we are, as Euraccess, for the first time working with. And with this science communication trainings webinar, we are doing our first sort of like communication together with them. But we are going to try to do more of this in the future. So I want to announce that Audi China is doing some sort of innovation workshop soon that we will be trying to support in whatever way that we can. And then later in the year, when it comes to the Science Slam, the Audi China is going to be involved as well, sponsoring one of the innovation prizes of the Science Slam workshop. So that is really exciting and cool. I'm really happy to be able to announce that right now. So for those of you that are interested in going into the Science Slam this year, there's even more reason than ever. Or if you're just interested in going with the innovation instinct that you have, and is the reason why you're here today, you could even think about the innovation workshop that he will introduce a little bit later. So I have with me Mr. Christian Jensen, who is the change manager of Audi China R&D. And I might allow Christian himself to explain to us what is a change manager. I'm sure it's very important job, because after all, R&D is all about change, isn't it? Christian, please take it away, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Haldor, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you to all of you for your time here and to listen to our presentation. So my background is actually in communication. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Prior to joining Audi China, I was also an entrepreneur, so I very much understand this side of the pressure. One of my companies was marketing and consultancy with a focus on a lot of clients, but one of which was Audi. And this is how I segued into my into my current position. So Haldor, back to your question, what is a change manager? A change manager is kind of this new position that companies are starting to incorporate into the corporate management landscape. And the reason is that conditions simply are becoming more volatile, more unpredictable. And so even for a highly process-driven German-style company such as Audi, we've recognized, as have my counterparts, for example, at Daimler or at BMW, where my counterparts' positions have recently been created, that greater process flexibility, the value of employer branding, common culture, particularly when it comes to the technology pipeline and to innovation, is really critical for business success. So what is a change manager? Many companies, I think, worldwide who are experimenting with this position make the mistake, in my opinion, of putting this in HR. In my opinion, it's not really an HR function. I'm personally, as Haldor mentioned, in the R&D division, which was a strategic choice. But this is really comes down to the business priorities. What do we need to be flexible with? What do we need to have more agility and speed to change within the company? And so maybe with that, I can share my screen. So Audi China, our largest division is in fact R&D. Maybe Haldor with a thumbs up. Are you able to see the screen correctly? Okay, very good. All right, so right now, my priorities are related to our new R&D setup. As I mentioned, the importance of R&D to Audi China cannot be overstated. We have a new R&D setup in terms of roles and responsibilities. We have a growing team, and we're really trying to double down on what we call the product influencing process. And by this, we basically just mean, how do we tell Germany what types of cars the Chinese customer needs? It's from a corporate perspective, it's a very complicated process. There's many divisions involved. And what used to work simply is too slow. It's too slow for the market, and it's too slow even globally compared to recent market entrants, like, for example, Tesla, or in China, we see a range of companies, honestly speaking, introducing pretty outstanding products, considering it's their first generation ever, and they have no experience with industrialization. And so we really just need to pick up the pace. Looking to the future, however, from an innovation perspective, we really need to build a new foundation. And that means now that the innovation model has broken, Audi doesn't do all of its own innovation. We have, for example, a software company, which has been globally listed. So how do you have a separate legal entity that is tasked with providing the stack for your cars? And how do we tell the company, which it sounds like we're in the same Volkswagen group, it's a legal barrier. How do we tell them what our requirements are? How do we pass our needs to them? Also in China, some of you may be familiar with this JV setup. As the previous speaker mentioned, having a strong local partner is key to your business success, and that's definitely the case in the automotive industry as well. Right now, we have a second joint venture partner, where for decades we only had one. There may be more in the future in the pipeline, we don't know yet, but how you work with stakeholders who are supposedly on an equal footing and how you balance their really quite emotional needs at the corporate level is very tricky, especially thinking again, the joint ventures have state ownership in all of them, sometimes at the national level, sometimes at the provincial level. So there's a lot of potential conflicts of interest. There's a lot of boxes to tick. And this is kind of this complex, multifaceted environment in which innovation has to find a way to thrive and to flourish. On the third bullet point, our innovation strategy does not exist in a vacuum. And that's something I'll keep repeating today. The main corporate strategy right now is electrification. So how does our electrification strategy pair up with our innovation strategy? And then finally, when we do a gap analysis, we consider, all right, these are the general innovation fields that we need. Do we have the competencies? Should we build those up in the region in China, or should we be bringing in talent from Germany to support that effort? A lot of decisions to make. I thought it might be interesting also to share with you the general approach to innovation at Audi. You might be surprised to know that an automotive company employs the V model. And the V model, for those of you in software or with the background in software-related development, you might recognize this. We have basically adapted this for our industry. So currently in the current setup, Audi China R&D, a team of around 220 people, is very much focused on the requirement side, which is the red side you can see there. The requirement side means we have to tell our development partners and the teams doing validation what the customer wants, what is coming in the market in terms of trends, and so forth. But the development work and the validation work are really done by separate teams. In the second phase, though, Audi China we are remodeling ourselves to do more of that hardcore development and innovation work. And then finally reaching a phase that I would really classify as end-to-end. And by that, in our industry, we mean from the market trends, from the concepts, from the really conceptual abstract phase, taking that all the way into, for example, the beautiful car that you see. I hope you like it on the right-hand side. And again, that phrase, so innovation does not exist in the corporate world in a vacuum. We ask ourselves every day at multiple levels in multiple departments, how should we innovate? What fields? Where should we innovate physically? Who should be the team innovating? Which teams? When should we innovate? When do we bite the bullet and commit the resources to making that happen? And you can think of it kind of like Legos or stacking boxes. So for starters, I think it's worth considering that in a company, the definition of innovation actually varies from place to place. And by that, I mean, if something is a minor modification on an existing technology, it is innovative, but a different team would take that. Whereas if we have something that's truly groundbreaking, truly never been in the product before, this would go down a completely different path. A lot of that has to do with the innovation model. For example, do we have an internally competitive innovation model, which is something you might see at Huawei, where you have different teams vying for budget. If you get the project, you move forward with money, and then everybody else that was pitching for this needs to go and find a new job internally. It's quite an intense sort of setup. Another aspect of an innovation model, should we have an open innovation model? To what level do we bring in academic institutions, suppliers, innovations teams, or should we do stuff primarily in-house? Project management software tools are a huge hurdle that nobody really often thinks about. When the innovation process involves hundreds of people, or for example, in Volkswagen Group China, over 1,500, if I remember correctly, people that are working on all kinds of innovations, it becomes very messy very quickly. And so those software tools and the processes all require a lot of training and a lot of financial investment in staff hours. M&A, we can talk about later, but that's, I think, a key question for anybody who's considering starting a company or who wants to pitch an idea. We do consider, should we do something in-house? Should we outsource it? Or with M&A, should we just buy the company? Should we make a major investment in this company so that we have a stake? That also builds up to how we manage our IP. Is that centralized? Is it in the region? And region, we mean the country of China, but this is classified as a region for our business purposes, and so on. What fields? In China especially, the company is very aware that our innovation strategy has to have a basis in China's national strategic priorities. But on top of that, we also look at what's coming in market. What are the trends, not just in our industry, but in industries that are somewhat parallel to us, or that sometimes cross over into our fields, such as, for example, telecommunications, smartphones, and so forth. Does the innovation create business value? What are the suppliers working on? There are whole teams dedicated just to talking to suppliers because the suppliers are doing all of these processes as well themselves. And a lot of times things are lost in translation, not sent, incorrectly classified as confidential. And so those pieces never really come together. And that's really definitely my job as the change manager to find more ways to put the blocks together. Where we would innovate, for example, next topic. At Audi China, as in any major corporation, your innovation might be thrown into any number of strategic roadmaps. They love this word. For innovation specifically, we tend to plan on a medium term. So with that, we mean 5 to 10 years. We do have longer winded strategies that are 10 years forward. However, for the most part, any specific technology we're looking at within 5 to 10 years. Now, that varies by company because every company's product lifecycle is different. So in the automotive industry, just fun facts, car start to finish, concept to dealership is minimum of about 5 years. And that's why our roadmaps are about 10 years long because we're going 2 product cycles. And you can look in your own industry or in the area you're interested in innovating in and think about that product lifecycle. That's so key to the timing from the company that might invest in you, fund your proof of concept, or partner with you, or so on and so forth. And finally, we're always constantly looking back at these roadmaps and looking at what's coming down the tech pipeline and seeing where we need more innovation, where we need solutions, where we feel that we are not capable of delivering the solution and we need to look outside the organization for that. Okay, who should innovate? This is another major question for us. Number one, if you work with a company that has multiple teams doing innovation, one concern that they will have that they might not tell you about, but which definitely affects your outcomes is this topic of synergy. And this buzzword is so abused, excuse me, but it's definitely a major problem. So is your innovation being taken by the right team? Are they spreading your project to all of the possible teams that might use it? So when you approach a company, one tip is to look at their organizational map and consider, are they the only entity within their team that actually could use my innovation? You might pitch it to them as saying, hey, this is more transportable to other topics, to other companies, and this is not a one-time investment. This is something that could really bring you value with a multiplier effect. Supplier ecosystem we talked about. In addition to all of this, who should innovate? Some teams in the company have the funding, have the manpower to actually execute a proof of concept project, a prototype. Some of them have a lab. And unfortunately, not every team has a lab. Not every team has adequate funding. Because of that, you have these teams. For example, we have a team called Future Center. Future Center is like a professional PowerPoint machine. They're very creative. They have lots of thoughts, a lot of information coming to them from all across the company, but they do not have a lab. They do not have academic ecosystem access. And they're very much in this, you can think of it like a fishbowl. It's a very useful fishbowl to us, but they don't really leave that fishbowl. So when you talk to a team at a company, you might also ask them what their scope of work is. Because if you notice that their scope of work doesn't really match, or they don't have this POC execution ability, they might not be a good fit, or you might need to look beyond them for more channels to really get your project sold to this company. And then finally, when do we innovate? From the company's perspective, funding is not unlimited, as it also is at an academic institution. Feasibility and time to market are key considerations for whether we can put something on the shelf or whether we advance something to the POC stage. At the same time, technology maturity, not just in the automotive industry, but in a general sense, is a key cutoff point for when we start at innovation and when we don't. And finally, if you think about the company's business needs, always keep those in mind, because that really makes or breaks the decision-making process for you. Number one, do we need differentiators for our products? Does your technology or innovation offer us a way to make a really wow car, a car that's never really been on the market in this way before. Customers are going to love it. Or is it just something nice to have, a modification on something existing, and so on? And any good innovation strategy from a corporate perspective will also take into account this final element, which is what is the overarching goal? And I really believe that at every company and in every industry that the goal will be slightly different. But if you are a consumer-facing company, it has to be to make the most incredible products ever seen before in the market. We at Audi are looking to create a next generation of cars in China that really exceed our customer demands and put us ahead of the competition. Now, if you've looked at our cars, frankly speaking, in the market, they're very luxurious, they're very premium, they're very dependable, definitely a car you would want to take on a date. But if you look at some of the technology in them, we have lagged behind, and we're aware of this. And that's why the innovation process is so important, and accelerating the innovation process within our company has such high priority. So let's take for a moment this academic ecosystem box off the shelf. Halder asked me before this presentation if I might explain how a researcher or a young startup or an institution can approach our company. So let's look at this timeline. When we start with a concept, on the left-hand side, we go through a whole series of steps before finally this concept enters what we call the product pipeline, or what others might understand as serial development. And by that, we mean we start making the car. This is industrialization. So from the concept and innovation phase, this is an opportunity for a researcher to contact us. At the same time, my department, which is R&D strategy, is also tasked with pre-development, academic relationships, technology partnerships, which is usually a little bit bigger of a company such as iFlyTech, SenseTime, Baidu, Alibaba, and so forth. Also startup scouting. This is an explicit task of this team. And this is a team which is one of a handful in the R&D organization. At the same time, my team also maintains a startup database, which is literally an Excel file. It's routinely updated. It's live in the cloud internally. And so a lot of other teams have access to this, notably procurement. Procurement is another team where you could approach and say, we are interested as a company, as a startup, in becoming your supplier. Our team also hosts tech days and supplier fairs, which are attended by a whole range of companies. And at those fairs, literally, this is, you come into the building, we've set up booths, tables, and so forth, power screens, and you have the opportunity to show us, pitch us your idea, your technology, show us why this is innovative and why we should work with you. And then finally, this last box, group mergers and acquisitions. Audi does not have a very large M&A team. However, this function is centralized at the Volkswagen group level. It's also not a big team, so quite intimate discussions. And for any one of these, I can tell you, honestly speaking, there is no correct way to approach us. I think, personally speaking, and looking at this pathway, our team is a logical first gatekeeper because we cover so many functions, especially at the Audi level. However, if for whatever reason the partnership needs to go to a different team, we're also extremely well positioned, best positioned to pass you to the right people. So as one example, I wanted to introduce this Horizons Beyond Innovation Incubator project, which I'm personally project manager for, and very proud that we are kicking this off together. The Horizons Beyond Innovation Incubator is a dedicated program for master's and PhD students only in China, and it's rigorously selected for. And really, I think this is a fantastic way that we can come together on this very interesting topic of mobility relatively far in the future, 2035 and beyond, but also to get in touch with master's and PhD students that are outside of the normal scope of Audi. For example, you're not in automotive design, you're not in engineering. We really welcome all types of disciplines to join this program, to go through the ideation program step by step, as well as a module, as was being discussed earlier. You know, how do I present my ideas? How do I pitch them? at the end of the Horizons Beyond program, we're going to have this demonstration day. And at this demo day, you really have the chance to sit in front of high-level executives, real decision makers, pitch your idea, and experience that process from start to finish, from concept to, even before concept, from brainstorming, from ideation, structured filtering, vetting of your ideas, and then finally to selecting an idea, refining your idea, visualizing your idea, and really presenting that idea at the highest level possible. So there's a QR code on the screen. If you're interested, either please get in contact with me or scan the QR code, and we very much look forward to welcoming some of you as applicants to the program.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I see that we have some questions. For those who want to apply for the Horizons Beyond, I guess you can scan the QR code. I know that in our audience, we mostly have people that are already started their research career, so this might not be a perfect match, let's say. But I mean, surely you guys have students under you that might benefit from this. And like Christian said, this includes every different field of research and so on. So I thought that was kind of interesting because I don't see that a lot. But I do totally agree. That is really important. You need to have a really wide diversity when it comes to ideas to be able to innovate. There's a question. Yeah,
please. Yeah. I was about to say, I think the reason we changed paths this year and went with a very open applicant pool is because innovation doesn't just happen within the industry, and some of the best ideas come from out of the box thinkers. And so this is as out of the box, I think, as we could get. And Tyler, to your point, yeah, absolutely. If you or you have context in the academic world, this is a great program, and please don't hold it just to yourself. If you have more friends around you that you think would benefit from this, please let us know. Yeah. A question, please.
Yeah, so the first question is from Corinne, who asks if there are any specific fields of research that you prefer. So what type of researcher is Audi looking for?
Corinne, thank you. There isn't a specific field of research, although on the application form, we would be interested, as well as if the researcher has already completed a PhD, I would be curious to know what the topic of the thesis was. But to be honest, within our R&D division, even frankly speaking, 50% or 60% of the researchers out of the 220 are PhD or master's holders, and a lot of them did not necessarily study automotive. For example, one colleague who I'm particularly close friends with and very well respected in the company is from chemistry. So absolutely nothing to do with automotive, really. Welcome, anybody.
Are there more questions from anybody? Anybody wants to ask? I think this is a great opportunity to sort of figure out how this world works. I think it's also implied in Corinne's question. She's asking what type of researchers Audi is looking for. I might ask you how, maybe clarify a little bit better. You already talked about the different entry points into the company to collaborate, but sort of, how do you work with researchers in particular? Let's say if a university would be looking for a researcher, you would normally to be hiring them as a professor, right? But in your case, what's going on?
That's a good question. It really depends on the topic. For example, at the group level, Audi itself does not make its own batteries. And the battery chemistry specialty team does work with research teams in China at an institutional level. So there's generally speaking a professor or a handful of professors that are tasked from the institution with dealing with Audi, kind of our quote unquote account managers, but really researchers in their own right. And I think this is quite common. And another example would be within my own team we do academic relations and partnerships. A professor might have a long-standing relationship with Audi by which he can feed his or her students internship opportunities. We can organize competitive events, sponsorship events, and so forth. For years, we had a sponsorship with Tsinghua University with several programs there. One of them a bit more directly related with Audi was e-racing. So automotive engineering students would put together carts and race, and then Audi would sponsor and participate in the finals and so forth.
Really interesting. Are there any further questions from the participants? If not, I think we will put the dot behind this sentence then. Thank you so much, Christian, for sharing your insights into how it is to work on the corporate side of R&D. It was really informative for me as well, and I'm also looking forward to see how this goes in the future. I would love to see, so this is what I want to see. I want to go 2 years from now into this group of people that came to this today to see if anybody of you have been developing your innovative ideas. Just yesterday, I was going through the participants in our from our doctoral training network, innovative training networks webinar 2 years ago. And I was just asking them a question, not related. And I found just out of nowhere that 5 of them were now inside of one of those innovative training networks. And I suddenly realized these webinars, they really do have impact. I mean, like we normally, Anna and I, we normally don't hear about them, but this is a lot of times something that inspires people to do something. So if you guys want to pursue one of those topics that we've been exploring in this training series, you should definitely use what you've learned here. You should definitely come back to us and discuss with us and our trainers and so on. I'm sure they will be happy to continue this conversation. I'm sure Audi China will be happy to keep interacting with these smart people that are here today. So thank you so much, Christian.
Thank you
for your part. And I think that we have kind of reached the end of the webinar right here. And I also see that we are hitting the point where we lost about 20% of the audience, which is perfect. That's quite good retention rate normally. But I would say maybe just to add here about the innovation ecosystem. We have already talked about today, like about the startups and the individuals, etc. But then we talked about the corporate world, which is like this other type of a beast, you know, the other type of a animal. And there's also this third animal that we might be more familiar with even, which is the government side. And in the European Union, there's also all of these different programs about innovation. And when I was listening to Christian earlier talking about synergy, etc., I got this flashback from my first meeting with the science counselors of the European Union here in China, probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I sat down there, I was newly graduated, and they spent 40 minutes talking about innovation. And I thought I considered myself quite innovative kind of dude, you know, like really innovative type, but I had no idea what they were talking about. And I looked at them and I was like, I don't know what they are talking about. Do they even like, it's like just become a word like innovation, innovation, innovation. But what do you even mean? Like, how does innovation even happen? And I have had to swallow my pride over time when I started to realize that actually the fact is that innovation is just very complicated and involves a lot of different actors. It happens throughout different stages of our whole economy and society and culture and so on. It involves people, individuals, researchers, scientists, academics, corporations, governments. It involves everybody, and everybody needs to put their hand on to sort of support, to make sure that you live in an innovative society. In the European Union, Euraccess belongs to DGRDD, which is the Director General of Research and Innovation. And I just want to point out that there are actually a lot of innovation support mechanisms within DGRDD. So for example, we have the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, which is really cool. I was just talking to Ulf Richter earlier when he was talking about his business. It was like, maybe this could fit with what they are doing because they run these big communities to connect together startups and corporations and universities, etc. And there's also the European Innovation Council, which has like all these different schemes to fund like startups and accelerate them, etc., which is really cool. And then there's like hundreds of other schemes. So if you're interested in any of this, Euraccess is absolutely the place to go. We can connect you with the right people and information how to sort of take advantage of this ecosystem in Europe. And maybe even the most simple thing, if you're a postdoc, if you're a PhD, and you're considering the Marie Curie Fellowship, which are the things that we continuously keep promoting here at EURAccess, and we will be doing a webinar about very soon. If you're interested in this, just know that it is possible to take this fellowship and do it inside a company. So that is, you can do it inside an R&D department of a company. That's absolutely, or small, medium-sized enterprises or bigger corporation. Anybody that is actively involved in research can take advantage of this and do like innovative projects as well. So that's maybe something that Anna and I could think about, how we could teach next time we do like that sort of webinar. I think that's an interesting angle. But what I wanted to do now is just kind of finish up the whole training series, because it's been now already 5 weeks, or let's say 4 weeks since we started, like a month. We did 5 different webinars throughout, and I just wanted to thank everybody that participated. First of all of you that kept coming every week after week to participate, and I hope this was useful for you. But I also want to thank all the people that were sort of helping us out throughout, doing the training, etc. I want to thank Ulf today and Christian, but also last week we had this amazing lineup of speakers, Corinna and Bill from the Falling Walls and SAP, as well as our science communicator, Emmy. This was really, really nice one. The week before that, we had people from Taylor and Francis talking about how to publish. We had like Henrietta Thompson, and I want to thank her for her really useful presentation. Before that, when we were talking about the interviews, we had with us the career development professional Dean Hogan, who was, I think, really good, and a lot of people enjoyed a lot working with him. And of course, let's not forget our first webinar with Dr. Alvaro Castells, our Science Slam winner from December last year. I know that Alvaro is here today, so I just want to say once more, thank you so much. I think that was a really great one. I think people enjoyed it really a lot. And I think it really set the tone for a really successful science communication training. And then, of course, I would like to thank our co-organizers at the German Academic Esteem Center, in particular, Melanie, just for like the amazing cooperation doing these 2 events at the end. I thought they were really innovative and cool. So that was really nice. And I hope I managed to catch her for coffee and maybe next week, and we can discuss how we can do it even better next year. I think that would be really, really nice. 1 or 2 practical points before I let you all go. Some of you have been participating because you want to, well, maybe one of the reasons why you participated, not the only reason I hope, is because you want to get the certification of attendance. And this is something that is absolutely doable. We did this for about 150 people last year. Like you can see on our website, we have 3 different tiers of certification, depending on how involved you were. If you came to a couple of those events, you can get like our silver certification, a gold one if you do 4 or more. And then there's this diamond one if you also send us in your sort of Science Slam presentation video, which only needs to be like 2 or 3 minutes. But we will follow up on the video requirements later in the group, in the science communication WeChat group that we have. So maybe what I could do also is go here and put it on the screen. I think that would be good. So for those of you that aren't in the group yet, I think you should definitely join us right now. That means I need to go to the back of my presentation. And there we are, share screen. And this would be it. If the screen is visible right now, this is the last chance to join the community. We have in our science communication group right now about 300 to 400 people in 2 different groups, because there's like the limitation of how big one of those groups can be. If you're already in either of them, you don't really need to scan it. But if you aren't, you should definitely do that, because this is where we're going to be following up. We're going to be explaining how you can get your certificates. We're going to be putting the recordings and the PPTs. It is also going to be an opportunity to talk to the people that participated, continue the conversation. We will be letting people know about these competitions like the Falling Wall, Science Slam, Horizons Beyond, these different things, keeping you in the loop in case you want to take your newfound science communication abilities and bring them out in the world. We will be there. And if you guys just want to sort of like engage with us and Euro Access, just feel free to add me. I'm in the group and I'll be happy to discuss any of the points that were going on. It would be really, really nice. If you're a master's or PhD student and you just came to this, well, I hope you took note of this cool opportunity that Audi just offered earlier. That was really cool. And for you, as well as everybody else, you should keep your eyes open for the Falling Walls in the Science Slam when that comes around later in the year. That is it on my side. Yeah, about the certification. If you want to get the certification, you need to let us know what name you were using on the Zoom account. Unfortunately, it's not always the same name as your real name, and it's sometimes a bit tricky to understand like who is who. So you just please send us an email or tell us in the group like what was your name, and so we can match it up for you. That's it. Is there anything extra that we want to add? Anna, Melanie?
Maybe just again, like from practical point of view, some have been asking about PowerPoint, like presentation slides and recording. We normally share them in the WeChat group, and you can also find them online on our website, china.euraccess.org. Every event has a registration page, and that's where we upload the recording and presentation slides. So just look it up there if you didn't receive them on the WeChat group.
Absolutely. All right. So it's almost dinner time. Should we let people off the hook? I hope everybody had a good science communication training, and I'll see you all in the Science Slam. Thanks everybody again, and bye-bye.
So much greetings from here too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.